What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me as always. If you like what you see here, do be sure to like, subscribe, and share. There's plenty more content on the way. So what I have in front of you today is the FN 509. This is a brand new release from FN, and it was basically an answer to the FNS line of firearms, which still exists. It's still in production, and they're great firearms. I did do a review on the FNS 9C, and I really enjoyed the gun. There was a lot to like about it, but there were a couple of things that I didn't like quite so much. So let's dive into this and let's see if they've made some improvements on this from their last iteration. So again, the FN 509, and of course this is unloaded. I do have an unloaded magazine in there. I just prefer that. So this is going to be pretty much a standard striker-fired polymer firearm, and this was FN's entry into the military trials, with which the Sig Sauer P320 has been the final winner, but the FN was one of the last runner-ups, so to speak, from what I understand. And I have to say, FN did a really good job with this gun. So let's go ahead and knock some specs out of the way, and then of course we're going to be talking about all of the features of the gun, what comes in the box. We're going to be wheeling in, shooting along the way, all of that good stuff. And at the end, of course, I'll kind of give my final wrap-up and opinion of this. So from a length standpoint, this is 7.4 inches. From an overall height standpoint, it is 5.56 inches. From a width standpoint, this is going to be 1.35 inches. The barrel length is 4 inches exactly. Now the weight on this is 26.9 ounces, so this is a little bit heavier gun than some of the other guns that are kind of in the same or similar category. Now the trigger weight on this, according to FN, and all of these stats do come from FN, it weighs anywhere from 5.5 to 7.5 pounds. Now I've done some testing on the Lyman gauge, so I'll give you my results on that. We may test it a time or two on video as well. We'll see how that goes. The magazine capacity for this is 17 rounds, and you do get 2 in the box, and here's my extra one right here. Just kind of a standard steel magazine. It does have your windows to check your round count in there, which is kind of nice. So really just standard magazines. They did away with the 3 magazines, which they used to do in a lot of the FNS lines, so they decreased that a little bit, and we'll talk about how that affects maybe the overall value of the firearm. Now the sights on this are going to be steel sights, which is fantastic. Now these happen to be the glow sights. They phosphoresce. They have to gather ambient light in the room or outside, and then they'll be able to glow. According to their website, they will have a release that also has night sights, which I imagine will also increase the cost of the gun just a little bit. Now these sights, and I'll tell you a little bit about the sights from a shooting perspective here pretty soon, but from just an overall sight perspective, these are not a Novak style. These actually have a very defined ledge. It's clear that this gun was really designed for duty use, whether it be law enforcement or military. So you do have quite a bit of surface area to do any one-handed manipulations if you need to do so. Now, one of the really nice things about this, and I will take this gun apart because you're not going to be able to see it very well like this, but the internals, especially the feed ramp and right under the feed ramp, are very well polished. So I'll be opening this up here in just a little bit to show you that. Now, it also does come with 2 back straps. Now, I found it a little bit odd. I guess I'm used to guns coming with 3 and in some cases 4 back straps, but in this case, on the gun, it came with, I guess you would call this the large back strap rather than medium, but a large back strap, it's got a little bit more material on it, a little bit more of a curve to it, so depending on your hand and how it may sit in the hand, you might want a little bit more material to sit in there versus more of a flat back strap right here. Now, admittedly, I would have liked to have seen a third one that actually came out a little bit more. Generally speaking, I like medium back straps. On most guns, that does just fine for me. I have pretty kind of average large hands, nothing special, not big, huge mitts by any stretch. But for this particular gun, a tiny bit more material would have been good. It's not the end of the world. I don't think it really inhibited the feel of the gun, how it feels in the hand, or really how it's shot. But again, a wish list, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more material, or maybe a third option on that. So that's it from a general spec standpoint. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the features of the firearm. Of course, you'll notice right off the bat, it does come with an accessory rail for lights, lasers, grenade launchers, that sort of thing. From a grip standpoint, it does come with, and I remember with the FNS 9 series, the grips were pretty aggressive, and not so much where it beat up your hand, but they were noticeably aggressive. And I find this to be not quite as aggressive, however, equally pleasing to hold, and certainly stayed put where I wanted it to. It does have front checkering and back checkering here on the back strap, and then it's got some side texturing, and actually has more of almost a stippling as we go up on the frame towards the upper part of where you would grip. And I like this quite a bit. I think that's a really nice touch. It makes it look a little bit more custom, which is kind of nice from a vanity standpoint. But it also, to me anyways, feels really good. So from a grip standpoint, I think there is plenty going on here to really keep this in your hand, and that's really nice. So sticking around the grip area, one thing, it does have ambidextrous magazine release, and it is not one of those ones that you swap out. It's actually ambidextrous right out of the box, and that can be really good for left-hand shooters for sure. One thing I've noticed, however, there's a little bit more of an effort that goes into releasing those magazines. So it's not quite as effortless as some guns, maybe a PPQ or a P320 VP9, that sort of thing. Although I know the VP9 has the paddle releases, still it's pretty easy to do so. I find you have to really kind of dig into these a little bit more. Now with time it may loosen up just a little bit. And again, it didn't inhibit the shooting or the fun at the range, to be honest with you, but just something to consider. And I think that may be the case with a lot of the firearms that have the automatic ambi magazine release, but again, not too big of a deal. Another thing within the grip for the magazine right here, there is a little bit of an indentation here at the bottom of the grip. So for some reason, you really have to yank that magazine out. There is a little bit of real estate to be able to grab onto and get a hold of that magazine. Also a really nice touch. And once again, I think that ties back to that duty background or duty intention for this type of firearm. Now it also does have ambidextrous slide releases on it as well, and the slide release does very well. And I'll tell you a little bit of story about the shooting as we go along with this. But if you've watched any of my other videos and watch how I shoot, generally speaking, I do like an overhand rack. I'm just kind of used to it unless I'm competing, and then I go for the slide release. In this case, however, I did use the slide release a little bit. So that story forthcoming in a moment or two. It does have your standard takedown lever, and we can go ahead and take it down here for just a moment or two. Got to get our magazine out of there. All you have to do is lock it back, and then you put your lever down and release it. You do have to pull the trigger, and once you do, the gun is apart. Now, I did promise you I would show you the barrel on that, and this is freshly cleaned, so there's a fair amount of oil on it. I get teased because I do tend to over oil my guns just a tiny bit. So that feed ramp, and hopefully you can see that in the light okay, it is nicely polished, and then the surface right underneath is also very well polished. So again, hopefully you can see that. But I basically interpret that as the manufacturer really took the time to refine the firearm, and I like that quite a bit. Now, as far as the guide rod, it is a dual captive guide rod, and some would say that does help mitigate some of the recoil, and so your mileage may vary there, but I found that the recoil on this was certainly pleasant. And of course, for the rest of the interior of the firearm, the fit and finish is absolutely fantastic. And I found that to be the same with the FNS 9. I think their millwork and their attention to quality and detail is very good. And that's the same with the frame as well. On the back, you have pretty beefy slide rails, which is nice. On the front, it's pretty standard on the locking block. But by and large, really, again, the construction is very nice. Now, while we're talking about the slide release, let me put this back together here real quick. One thing when I was shooting, and again, we'll take a look at shooting footage here in just a bit, but I noticed that this gun got pretty darn hot. And before you laugh, I realize guns do get hot as you shoot them, and I would expect that, of course. However, I noticed that the release lever here, the takedown lever rather, since it's metal and it sits so close to the barrel, and that barrel is a little bit thinner, this thing got really hot. And when I shoot a gun, I have a thumbs forward grip with my left hand. I'm right-handed, and I tend to really ride that release, and that's the same with a lot of firearms that are designed like this. And I noticed by about 150, 180 rounds or so, and I shot 250 for this first range visit, this thing got pretty darn hot, and I had a couple of other guys shoot the gun as well and see what they thought. They remarked the exact same thing. It was unusually hot. Now, not dangerously hot. It didn't hurt or anything like that. I don't want to tell you that the gun's going to injure you. And that was, again, after basically 180, 170, 180 rounds when I really started to notice it. That's quite a few rounds before you really start to notice that. And I probably shot all 250 rounds in about 20, 25 minutes or so. If you watch my videos, I'm kind of a fast shooter. I don't really stay there all day. So just something to kind of be mindful of with this gun. But otherwise, again, from a frame standpoint, the fit and finish on it is absolutely fantastic. It's very nice, and it seems very sturdy. From a slide standpoint, we do have front and back serrations, and they're very grippy. I mean, I've got a little bit of oil on my hands right now, and I'm still able to rack this without a problem. And FN says that they've got a reduced slide functionality or a slide actuation on this, so it makes it a little bit easier to do so. I'll tell you, it's a little bit firm right now, but I think that'll probably soften up a little bit. And again, it's perfectly reasonable. I think the etching on the slide is very tasteful. I mean, it does have the FN marker on it. It does say 509, but it's very, very faint, and I like that. I mean, it's very subdued. On the top, it does have the, I guess you would call this kind of an indention, so to speak, or outdention. Is that a word? I don't even know. But it is milled a little bit to help acquire that line of sight as you're shooting. Your mileage may vary there, but I've heard that discussed several times. And then the sights, again, steel sights. Now, one thing about these sights, and I'll put this back up here so you can get kind of an idea of what that sight lineup looks like. To me, these sights sit just a tiny, tiny bit high, and it took a little while for me to, I guess, get used to that when I was shooting. And once I got used to it, it was fine. I don't think it really made a difference on the impact of the bullet, where it was landing. I mean, these aren't suppressor height sights or anything like that, but they do sit just a little bit tall. And again, the other guys that shot this also remarked the same thing. So another thing to just kind of be aware of there. But again, overall, the fit and finish on this firearm is top notch. I mean, this obviously is built to run and built to last. And if you haven't experienced an FN, this might be a great option for you. I was really expecting it to be a little bit bigger since it's technically a duty gun. But it still fits with what I consider basically a compact firearm with a full-size grip. So you're getting that kind of carry grip with the 17 rounds. So kind of a best of both worlds if you're looking for that. But out of the box, I mean, a really good value. And I think you can find these for generally in the kind of mid $500 range, that sort of thing. And it does come with a nice little FN bag that the gun is in, the extra magazine in the back strap. Now, the one thing that I thought was kind of funny, it does come with a cardboard box. Boo. I prefer to see a polymer box of some sort or another. However, at the end of the day, it's really not the box that matters. It's the gun. But just something to note as well. So, enough of me prattling on about this. Let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit of shooting at the range and see how this thing does. Alright, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So like I said, the FN509 is really a great shooter. It took me a little while to get used to the sights because I felt they were a little bit high, and it also took me a moment or two to get used to the trigger. So while we're talking about the trigger, let's go ahead and kind of dive into that for just a moment or two. So this is going to be a safety trigger. However, it's not a safety lever or dingus like maybe a Glock or a PPQ. This is going to be more in line with the Smith & Wesson, so it's just the hinge design. However, it feels like really good quality and very. It seems like it would hold up to a lot. I find that the Smith & Wesson triggers, I feel like they're a little bit more flimsy. That's just my opinion, but this feels very solid. Now, how is that trigger pull? When I started pulling the trigger at the gun store before I bought this, I was really impressed. Now, I noticed right away it's a very smooth uptake. However, there's a fair amount of resistance. I'll try and keep my finger out of the way as best I can. There's some resistance there, but it does go right up to the wall very quickly. Not an issue whatsoever. And then once you're at the wall, you've got a break, and there is just a little bit of creep in there. It's not a break like you might find on maybe a PPQ or a VP9 or even a TP9 SF Elite, something like that. But it is certainly good, and it's tactile and audible. And then that reset is right there, and the reset is actually fantastic. Now, it is out a little ways. It's not right back up against the wall, so you've got maybe, I don't know, 3 millimeters or so of travel. However, I like the feel of it. It's predictable, and it's really nice. So once again, from the very beginning, we've got our uptake, and there's our wall, and there's our break. Again, it's a defined break, but there's just a little bit of creep in there. And then our reset. And then we're back to start. So I like this trigger. Now, once again, FN says that the trigger is going to be somewhere in the 5.5 to 7.5 pounds. They give a pretty generous range in there. I did test this off camera, and I was coming in just shy of 7 pounds. So I would certainly categorize this at the top of the echelon as far as weight that I would like in a trigger. But I've said this before. To me, a trigger does not have to be 3.5, 4 pounds. I like those. They're great. But if a trigger is going to be heavier, as long as it's smooth and predictable, I really am okay with that. So let's go ahead and give this a try. These triggers can be a little bit of a pain, but we'll give it a try and see how this does. All right, so that's 7 pounds, 4.3 ounces, so just a little bit heavier. I have found, after doing this on, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 videos, that this tends to pull just a little bit heavier when I'm on camera, so it always makes a liar of me. But we'll give this a try again and see how this does. All right, 7 pounds, 5.8 ounces. So it's coming in just a little bit heavier than my testing off camera. You know, your mileage may vary, and you have to remember that the guy behind the camera is pulling this dumb thing, and so there's certainly going to be a margin for error there. So one more time. All right, 6.94, so a little bit inconsistent there, I guess, if you're looking at the other two. But I would say, once again, at least for this particular gun, for this user, generally speaking, it's falling right in the high 6s. So, again, right on the edge of what I would consider really acceptable for a trigger. However, because of the way it feels, and it does feel good, and that reset's great, I really don't mind it. And again, it took a little time to get used to at the range. The week before, I'd been shooting a Canik TP9 SF Elite and a PPQ for a comparison video. So I was a little bit spoiled by very light triggers. So took a minute to get back into the saddle with something like this. But after I got used to it, it was just fine. Not a problem at all. And from a duty standpoint, I think it's perfectly acceptable. So once again, this is the FN509. I'm really excited to hear what you guys think about this, what questions you have about it. If you're interested in FNs, which one might be better, whether it's the FNS line or the 509 line. I'll try and answer those as best I can. And otherwise, again, looking forward to your comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time. Thanks.